Have you ever felt like your prayers are simply messages sent into an empty void, with no certainty they're even being received? Like God's voice is muffled by layers of noise, doubt, and distraction in your daily life? What if I told you that the greatest spiritual misunderstanding of our time isn't about God's willingness to speak, but about where we're positioning ourselves to listen? This fundamental misconception has kept countless sincere believers trapped in a cycle of spiritual frustration, constantly straining to hear a distant voice when the divine is whispering directly from within. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, financial trouble, or relationship conflict, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging God for guidance, yet feeling that his voice remains frustratingly silent or unclear. You're not alone. This experience is nearly universal because we've been taught to look in the wrong direction entirely. We've learned to perceive God as existing somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, beyond our reach, beyond our immediate experience. But what if the veil between you and God's voice isn't nearly as thick as you've been led to believe? The revolutionary understanding I'm about to share with you today transforms not just your prayer life, but every aspect of your spiritual journey. The kingdom of heaven, that divine reality where God's voice speaks clearly, is not a distant realm waiting for us after death or accessible only to spiritual elites. It is, as Scripture profoundly reveals, a state of consciousness that exists within you at this very moment. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with prayer, spiritual guidance, and divine communication. When you truly grasp that hearing God's voice isn't something you need to strain for, but rather recognize as already present within the very essence of your being, your spiritual practice transforms from desperate pleading to joyful communion. Imagine waking each morning with an innate awareness of divine guidance flowing naturally through your consciousness. Picture approaching challenges not with anxiety about making the right decision, but with a quiet confidence in the still, small voice that never stops speaking within you. This isn't wishful thinking or esoteric mysticism. It's practical spirituality that produces tangible transformation in your discernment, decision-making, and spiritual sensitivity. The 5 daily shifts we'll explore today have helped countless believers move from spiritual static to crystal-clear divine communication. These aren't complicated techniques requiring years of theological training. They're simple adjustments in how you position your consciousness to receive what's already being transmitted. What would your relationship with God look like if you stopped straining to hear a distant voice and instead awakened to the divine whisper that has been speaking within you all along? The first shift begins with a profound recognition that changes everything. The practice of the presence. This isn't about complicated meditation techniques or esoteric rituals. It's about developing a continuous awareness of the divine kingdom that already exists within you. This awareness becomes the foundation for hearing God's voice with remarkable clarity. If these insights about hearing God's voice have resonated with you, subscribe to join our growing community of spiritual seekers. We're exploring practical ways to recognize divine guidance in everyday life. The transformation begins with your first waking moments. Tomorrow morning, before your feet even touch the floor, pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, "The kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine consciousness is my true nature." This tiny decision creates ripples that extend far beyond that moment, establishing a mindset that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. Behind the scenes of every spiritual breakthrough is this fundamental shift in awareness. You're not creating something new, you're recognizing what has always been present. This recognition acts like a tuning fork, adjusting your spiritual frequency to align with divine communication that's already broadcasting within you. The journey toward clearer spiritual hearing continues throughout your day. Whether you're driving to work, sitting in a meeting, or preparing dinner, these ordinary moments become sacred opportunities to practice presence. A brief pause, a quiet breath, a simple acknowledgement, God is speaking within me now. Now, I want to go even deeper into what might be the most overlooked truth on the spiritual path. The hidden insight that most seekers miss is surprisingly simple. Consistency matters infinitely more than intensity. This revelation contradicts much of our cultural programming about spiritual growth, where we're often led to believe that dramatic spiritual experiences are the primary pathway to transformation. The impact of 5 minutes of presence, practiced daily, will far outweigh occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. Your spiritual receptors are being fine-tuned through regular, gentle adjustments, rather than occasional, intense overhauls. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a fire hose. Throughout your day, especially during challenging moments, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the decision points where this practice reveals its power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond material appearances. The mindset shift happens gradually but unmistakably. You'll begin noticing subtle changes at first. A deeper peace in stressful situations, unexpected clarity about persistent problems, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These revelations unfold naturally as you consistently return to the awareness that God's voice isn't something you need to search for. It's the very essence of your consciousness. If you've ever experienced even a fleeting moment where God's guidance suddenly became crystal clear amid life's chaos, write in the comments, "I've glimpsed the inner voice." The journey of hearing God's voice more clearly extends beyond dedicated prayer time into every aspect of daily living. Consider one of life's most challenging battlegrounds, your physical health. When symptoms appear, whether minor discomfort or serious diagnosis, our conditioned response typically follows a predictable pattern: panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. This natural reaction often drowns out the very spiritual guidance we need most. The third shift in your daily practice involves approaching health challenges with a transformed mindset. Instead of allowing fear to dominate your consciousness, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness and divine perfection. This recognition creates a sacred space where God's voice can speak clearly about your well-being. Please understand, this approach isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The inner journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual awareness and appropriate action. When facing health concerns, your first decision point becomes pivotal. Will you react from fear or respond from spiritual awareness? Think about someone with chronic pain who's been told they'll simply have to live with their condition. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for hearing divine guidance that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. Now I want to explore how this same principle transforms another area where anxiety often drowns out God's voice: your financial life. Financial concerns trigger our deepest fears about survival and security, creating so much static that divine guidance becomes nearly impossible to discern. The hidden truth behind financial freedom isn't about the numbers in your bank account, but about the awareness in your consciousness. From kingdom perspective, you recognize that divine substance is infinite and omnipresent. Your experience of supply is primarily a reflection of your consciousness, not external economic conditions. This profound shift allows you to make practical financial decisions from a place of clarity and trust rather than scarcity and panic. When unexpected expenses arise or income decreases, your first response isn't fear, but a return to the awareness that God's voice is speaking guidance even now, in this circumstance. Consider how different your financial journey might be if you approached every money decision as an opportunity to hear divine wisdom rather than a source of anxiety. This doesn't mean ignoring practical budgeting or financial planning. It means bringing a different quality of presence to these activities. The transformation often begins subtly. Perhaps you notice less emotional reactivity when bills arrive or unexpected opportunities for increased income appear. These aren't coincidences, but revelations of what becomes possible when you position yourself to hear God's voice regarding provision. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance provided unexpected solutions to financial challenges, type in the comments, "Provision follows presence." The fourth shift in hearing God's voice more clearly emerges in what might be our most complex arena: relationships. Think about it. Our connections with others often become the very battlegrounds where divine guidance is most difficult to discern. We approach relationships seeking validation, security, or fulfillment from others, creating a dynamic where our spiritual receptors become clouded by emotional needs and expectations. Kingdom consciousness transforms this relational landscape completely. When you recognize the divine presence speaking within yourself, you naturally begin perceiving it in others as well. This shift doesn't magically make relationship challenges disappear, but it provides an entirely different foundation for navigating them. Consider how this plays out in everyday interactions. When your spouse says something hurtful, your immediate impulse might be defensive reaction. But pausing to recognize the kingdom within creates a moment where you can hear guidance beyond the emotional trigger. When a friend disappoints you, the awareness of divine presence provides perspective that transcends the immediate situation. The catalyst for relationship transformation isn't finding perfect people, but developing perfect listening. You begin hearing God's voice speaking through even difficult interactions, revealing insights about yourself and others that would otherwise remain hidden behind emotional reactions. This mindset revolution extends beyond intimate relationships to every human connection. Workplace conflicts, family tensions, even brief encounters with strangers become opportunities to hear divine wisdom rather than obstacles to peace. The blueprint for healthy relationships emerges not from external advice, but from internal guidance that becomes increasingly clear through practice. Now I want to explore what might be the most overlooked accelerator in developing clear spiritual hearing: the power of community. While inner recognition is ultimately a personal journey, seeking spiritual community becomes essential as your awareness deepens. Finding others who understand this practice creates an environment where your receptivity to God's voice can expand exponentially. The hidden dynamic at work here differs fundamentally from conventional social connections. Unlike groups formed around shared interests or activities, authentic spiritual community provides a context where inner recognition is valued, supported, and multiplied through shared experience. When multiple people practice presence together, the collective field of awareness often reveals guidance that might remain obscure to any individual. Think of it as spiritual acoustics. Certain environments naturally amplify sound, while others dampen it. Similarly, some relational contexts naturally enhance your ability to hear divine guidance, while others create interference that makes clarity nearly impossible. The cultivation of spiritual fellowship isn't about religious obligation, but strategic positioning for clearer reception. This doesn't require abandoning existing relationships or joining formal organizations. Sometimes spiritual community forms organically around kitchen tables, in living rooms, or through meaningful conversations, with just one other person who shares your commitment to presence. The essential element isn't the structure, but the shared awareness. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance became clearer through connection with others on a similar spiritual path, share in the comments. Community clarifies guidance. The fifth shift in hearing God's voice clearly transforms one of the most significant portions of your waking hours, your work life. For many people, professional environments represent spiritual dead zones where divine guidance seems particularly difficult to access. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, and performance expectations creates a frequency of anxiety that drowns out the still, small voice within. Kingdom consciousness revolutionizes this dynamic by transforming work from mere employment to spiritual expression. When facing workplace challenges, the simple practice of pausing to recognize the divine reality beyond material appearances creates space for unexpected insight and guidance. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult colleague interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. Subscribe to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. Each video translates profound spiritual truths into practical steps you can implement immediately in your daily walk with God. Behind the scenes of truly innovative work is this profound shift in awareness. The most groundbreaking creative solutions rarely emerge from stressed, constricted consciousness. They flow naturally when we access the unlimited intelligence that speaks within kingdom awareness. This isn't abstract philosophy, but practical transformation that affects productivity, problem-solving, and professional fulfillment. Consider how different your work experience might be if you approached each task not as a separate entity struggling through challenges alone, but as a living expression of divine consciousness. You'd approach obstacles from abundance rather than scarcity, from creative possibility rather than limitation, from spiritual partnership rather than isolated struggle. The impact extends far beyond measurable metrics to transform the very quality of your daily experience. Now I want to explore what might be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of hearing God more clearly. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypassing. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. The revelation at the heart of this peace is profound. When you position yourself to hear God's voice clearly, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, but a foundational frequency of tranquility that transcends particular situations. This peace becomes your anchor through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. Divine guidance flows with remarkable clarity when your consciousness isn't clouded by anxiety. A woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response. Not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing, beyond intellectual understanding, that the divine voice that had proven faithful in smaller challenges remained accessible even through life's darkest valley. If you've experienced moments where unexpected peace arrived precisely when you needed divine guidance most, share in the comments. Peace precedes clarity. Now I want to reveal what might be the most challenging aspect of hearing God's voice with greater clarity. The pathway to this transformation requires something that most spiritual seekers in today's world are unwilling to give: consistent commitment, regardless of immediate results. Let's be honest about what this journey truly demands. This isn't a weekend workshop or 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. The breakthrough comes through daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate effects. Faith in spiritual truth when material appearances seem to contradict it completely, and patience through what can be a painfully gradual development process. The hidden dynamic at work here is countercultural in almost every way. Some who begin this practice experience dramatic breakthroughs within weeks or months. Others work diligently for years before significant changes appear visibly in their experience. A few grow impatient and abandon the practice when immediate miracles fail to materialize. The decisive factor isn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. Think about the most meaningful transformations in your life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change, the kind that reshapes your entire experience, almost always unfolds through consistent small shifts rather than dramatic singular events. Hearing God's voice with greater clarity follows this same developmental arc. Each recognition creates subtle adjustments in your spiritual receptors, gradually tuning you to divine frequency with increasing precision. The blueprint for success here involves embracing what modern culture rejects entirely: the wisdom of patience. Our society has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in virtually every domain, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revolution that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. Consider the growth of an oak tree. No amount of impatience, effort, or technique will make an acorn reach its full stature in a month. It follows a developmental timeline encoded in its very nature. Similarly, consciousness unfolds according to its own divine timing. The mindset shift involves aligning your expectations with this natural process rather than imposing artificial timelines based on impatience or comparison with others. This doesn't mean passive waiting, but active participation in the process. Just as a gardener creates optimal conditions for growth without directly forcing the plant to mature faster, your consistent practice creates the perfect environment for spiritual hearing to develop naturally. Every moment you pause to recognize the kingdom within, you're providing essential nourishment for this unfolding awareness. If you're willing to embrace this journey of gradual unfolding, trusting the process even when immediate results aren't apparent, type in the comments, "I choose patient persistence." Now I want to offer perhaps the most liberating truth of this entire journey. You can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. The path to hearing God's voice more clearly doesn't require prerequisites or spiritual credentials. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special training or decades of spiritual study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there, and it will always be there. This insight contradicts much of our conventional spiritual programming. We've been conditioned to believe that divine communication requires elaborate preparation, special techniques, or advanced spiritual status. The revolutionary understanding that transforms this journey is recognizing that your ability to hear God's voice clearly isn't something you need to create through effort. It's something you simply recognize as already present. Think about the implications of this truth in your daily experience. The blueprint for transformation isn't about adding something new to your life, but removing the barriers to what already exists eternally within your consciousness. Your recognition doesn't create divine guidance, but reveals what has always been speaking beneath the surface of your awareness. The decision point you face in this moment isn't whether to begin an arduous spiritual journey requiring special resources or rare abilities. It's simply whether you'll acknowledge what already exists within you. This acknowledgement can begin with your very next breath, regardless of your current circumstances, spiritual background, or perceived limitations. The practical pathway forward couldn't be simpler. Start today, this very moment, by recognizing as often as you remember, the kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. Spiritual guidance is speaking within my consciousness, regardless of external appearances. This recognition isn't complicated or esoteric. It's a simple return to truth that anyone can practice. The framework for implementation follows natural rhythms of daily life. Practice this recognition in the morning when you first awaken, throughout challenges when clarity seems most elusive, before sleep as you review the day's journey. The consistency of return matters infinitely more than the duration of each recognition. Even 3 seconds of genuine acknowledgement creates space for divine clarity to emerge. The behind-the-scenes reality of this practice involves embracing both progress and setbacks with equal grace. Be patient with yourself through inevitable inconsistency. Some days you'll remember frequently, other days hardly at all. Some recognitions will feel profoundly meaningful, others mechanical and routine. The transformative power works through all of these variations when approached with genuine intention rather than perfectionism. Celebrate small victories along the way, moments when divine guidance suddenly becomes crystal clear, when peace arrives unexpectedly amid chaos, when creative solutions emerge from nowhere. Learn from temporary defeats, times when you forget completely, when emotional reactions override spiritual awareness, when you find yourself operating entirely from material consciousness. If you're ready to begin this simple practice of recognition today, write in the comments, "I recognize the kingdom within." What makes this approach to hearing God's voice so uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to become someone different or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. Unlike many spiritual practices that demand you change your personality, lifestyle, or natural way of being, this recognition simply invites you to embrace who you've always been beneath the surface of material appearances. The transformation paradox at work here is profound. The journey toward clearer spiritual hearing isn't about becoming someone new, but about recognizing your original nature that has always existed. This isn't about adding something foreign to your experience, but removing the layers of conditioning that have muffled divine communication within you. Think about how liberating this truth really is. You don't need to force yourself into uncomfortable spiritual personas or pretend to be someone you're not. The blueprint for authentic spiritual connection has been encoded in your consciousness from the beginning. Every time you turn within to acknowledge this spiritual truth, you're not creating something artificial, You're removing another layer of illusion that has kept you imprisoned in limitation and fear. This recognition works within your unique personality, circumstances, and life path. Whether you're naturally analytical or intuitive, extroverted or introspective, artistically expressive or practically minded, the kingdom consciousness adapts to your authentic self rather than demanding conformity to external spiritual stereotypes. The decision framework for implementation becomes remarkably simple. Allow yourself to be who you truly are. While practicing presence, your natural qualities become channels for divine expression rather than obstacles to be overcome. This integration of spiritual awareness with authentic selfhood creates a sustainable pathway that doesn't require constant effort or pretense. Now I want to reveal what might be the most overlooked dimension of hearing God's voice clearly. The journey of recognition doesn't happen in isolation. It naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. Spiritual. Truth was never meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. This sharing doesn't require becoming a teacher or preacher. It happens organically through your transformed presence in everyday relationships and situations. As you practice hearing God's voice more clearly through these 5 daily shifts, you become a living example that quietly inspires others to begin their own practice of recognition. Consider the hidden impact of your spiritual journey on those around you. When you respond to challenges from kingdom awareness rather than reactive fear, you demonstrate a different way of being that others naturally notice. When you make decisions from divine guidance rather than anxiety, you create ripples of transformation that extend far beyond your individual experience. The catalyst for spiritual awakening often isn't elaborate teaching, but simple authenticity. Your willingness to acknowledge the kingdom within becomes permission for others to recognize the same reality in themselves. This multiplication happens without effort or intention. It's the natural result of living from spiritual truth in everyday situations. If you've noticed how your own spiritual practice has subtly influenced others around you, share in the comments. Presence creates ripples. As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that spiritual teachers have emphasized throughout the ages. The journey of hearing God's voice clearly isn't meant to be a solitary pursuit, but a shared awakening that ripples through our collective consciousness. If these teachings about recognizing the kingdom within have resonated with something deep inside you today, I'd love to continue this exploration together. Subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. Each video explores practical ways to experience divine guidance more clearly through everyday challenges and opportunities. The most beautiful part of this journey is that every person who embraces these practices becomes a living testament to the possibility of deeper spiritual connection. If today's message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, write in the comments, "The kingdom within awakens." Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in these insights about hearing God's voice more clearly, consider tapping that like button, not for algorithms or metrics, but as a quiet acknowledgement that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a simple gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. There's a video right here about maintaining spiritual awareness through challenging circumstances that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to sustain divine connection even when external conditions seem to contradict spiritual truth. Until next time, remember that the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition.
My friends, let us come together in a spirit of deep stillness and receptivity, for the truth we are about to consider cannot be grasped through the intellect nor can it be approached as one more idea added to our storehouse of beliefs. It must be felt within, recognized in the quietness of our own being. There comes a moment in the life of every seeker when the question of life and death, of the appearing and disappearing of form, stands before us not as theology, not as philosophy, but as direct experience. It is in this moment that the truth of our identity is revealed most clearly if we are willing to see it. We have, for centuries, regarded death as an enemy, as a dark and terrible event that closes the door upon all that we have known. Yet this fear has been born only of one mistake, the belief that life is in the body, that the body is the self, and that the dissolution of the physical form is the dissolution of our being. This, my friends, is the great misunderstanding. The body is not the life. Consciousness is the life. The I that I am is the life eternal. And when we begin to perceive this, even faintly, the fear of death begins to lose its power over us. In the final months of my earthly life, there was no battle with death, no desperate attempt to hold the body together, no appeal to an external God to preserve a form that was never the seat of identity. Instead, there was only the quiet recognition that the life which animates, sustains, and maintains itself as this awareness has no beginning and no ending. What appears as birth, what appears as death, these are movements within consciousness, but they do not touch the one who witnesses them. And so, as we enter this subject today, let us not approach it as though we were studying the end of something. We are studying the revelation of something. We are studying the moment in which the personal sense of life falls away and the presence that has always been there, the I that is God, itself expressing as individual consciousness, shines forth in its purity. We are studying the truth that stands behind the veil of appearances. Let your heart be at ease. We are not here to contemplate loss, but to recognize gain. We are not here to mourn the frailty of the form, but to witness the eternality of the formless. And as we proceed, let us hold this one simple truth before us. No one has ever died. Forms have come and gone. Bodies have appeared and disappeared. But the invisible presence, the I that is God, remains untouched, unchanged, eternally expressing itself as the life you are. When we see this clearly, the great fear dissolves, and it is in this dissolving that true freedom begins. My friends, let us look gently and honestly at this matter of fear. For fear is not conquered by force, nor is it dissolved by effort. Fear is dispelled only by light, by the recognition of what is eternally true. And nowhere is fear more deeply rooted in human consciousness than in the belief that life can be taken from us, that existence can be threatened, and that identity can come to an end. It is very important that we do not condemn ourselves for this fear. Even the most sincere spiritual seeker may find that when the sense world presses upon him with its testimony of pain, decline, or danger, an instinctive tightening arises. This is not a moral failing, nor is it proof that we have been unfaithful to truth. It is simply the residue of centuries of conditioning human belief accepted as reality long before we had awakened to the nature of our true being. The universal fear of death is not personal. It is not your fear or my fear. It is the collective fear of a world that has identified itself with the body, this temporary form, this garment of flesh, and has forgotten the invisible life that animates it. When we speak of death, we are really speaking of the belief that life is in matter, dependent upon matter, and vulnerable because matter is subject to change. Let us understand this clearly. Fear persists only where we still believe we are separate from the source of life. Fear lives only in the conviction that we are self-contained, isolated beings struggling to preserve our existence. But the very moment we glimpse even faintly that the life we are living is not personal life but God life, not human existence but divine expression, that fear begins to lose its footing. Many spiritual seekers wonder, why, after all my study, all my meditation, all my spiritual practice, does fear still arise when the body is threatened? The answer is simple. The surface mind has accepted the truth, but it has not yet permeated the deeper levels of conditioning. We may intellectually declare, "I am eternal," yet still reflexively behave as though the body were our life. These two layers must become one. And so I say to you with tenderness, do not be discouraged when fear appears. Fear appearing is not a sign of spiritual failure. It is an invitation to deeper recognition. It is the opportunity to turn once again to the truth that the life you are is not in the body, nor is it subject to the changes that touch the body. Fear arises only because we have momentarily forgotten who we are. And the moment we remember, truly remember, not as a belief but as a simple recognition, fear dissolves, not because we have pushed it away, but because there is nothing left in us for it to cling to. Every fear is a shadow of forgotten truth, and death is the greatest shadow of all. But when the light of I Am dawns in consciousness, even this shadow cannot remain. Now, let us turn gently to that period in which the physical form known as Joel Goldsmith moved toward its conclusion. I speak of these things not to stir emotion, nor to create a story about a person, but to show you how the principles we study become living demonstration when appearances grow most intense. The outer scene of those final months was simple: a body in decline, symptoms increasing, strength diminishing, and the natural processes that accompany the closing of physical life making themselves known. To the human eye, this is the point at which fear rises most sharply. The world believes that when the body weakens, life weakens. When the body deteriorates, identity deteriorates. When the body comes to its end, the person comes to an end. But this is precisely the moment when the one who has lived in truth knows that none of this touches the reality of being. During those days, there was pain, there was limitation, there was what the world calls terminal illness. But listen carefully. There was no personal sense of suffering, because the one who had spent a lifetime practicing the presence did not identify himself with the sensations of the body. He acknowledged them, yes, of course. Denial never plays a part in spiritual realization, but he did not take ownership of them. He allowed the body to be the body, the appearance to be the appearance, while resting in that quiet inner knowing, I am the life which is God. I am the presence that neither waxes nor wanes. I am the awareness in which this body appears, moves, and eventually dissolves. There was no attempt to force healing, no attempt to cling to physical continuity. Why? Because he understood the body to be an instrument useful for a time, then released when its function is complete. There is no tragedy in this, any more than there is tragedy in setting aside a garment that has become worn. The garment serves its purpose and is laid aside, but the one who wore it continues unchanged. And so the atmosphere around him in those days was one of quietness, not darkness, not fear, not dread quietness, a deep stillness that arises when the battle with appearances has ended, when consciousness no longer tries to control, improve, or preserve form, but simply beholds. Those who were near him reported no sense of struggle, no frantic searching for remedies, no pleading for intervention. There was only a soft resting in the presence that had guided his entire journey. That resting was not resignation, let us be clear. Resignation is a gesture of defeat. This was recognition. recognition that the life which lived as Joel Goldsmith was never born into a body and could not be removed by the departure of a body. Recognition that the I which spoke through him from the beginning was the same I that existed before Abraham was, the same I that is the life of every individual who hears these words now. It is important to see the outer scene only as context, not as truth. The truth was in the stillness, in the non-reaction, in the peaceful abiding. The truth was in the refusal to accept the body's condition as a statement about identity. And in this way, even the final days of the physical form became a teaching not in words, but in demonstration. This is the opportunity every one of us has, not merely at the end of life, but every time the body or circumstances bear witness to change. The appearance is never the truth. The truth stands behind it as the silent, eternal presence that is our very being. Now, my friends, let us look more deeply at what was taking place during those final months, for this is where the real teaching lies. The outer appearance of a declining body is of no great significance. Bodies come and go, and they have done so since time began. What matters is the state of consciousness from which we meet these appearances. This is the entire secret of spiritual life, the recognition of the I that is eternal, even as the forms through which it expresses rise and fall in their appointed season. The inner practice in those days was the same practice that had been lived for decades. No new technique was introduced, no special meditation for the dying, no urgent prayer for deliverance. For truth does not change with circumstances. Truth is the same whether we are walking through a garden or lying upon a sick bed. And so the practice was simply this: resting in the awareness of I am. I am the presence that has no beginning and no ending. I am the life that is self-sustained and self-complete. I am the light that cannot be dimmed by shadows of material belief. I am the only identity anyone has ever had. In that recognition, there is no need to resist sensations, no need to argue with the body's condition, no need to attempt to shape appearances by thought. The mind grows very quiet, for it is no longer trying to control life. It is simply resting in life itself. This resting is not passivity. It is the highest form of activity, though it appears outwardly as stillness. It is the activity of divine awareness flowing without obstruction. It is the activity of truth dissolving the belief in a personal self. It is the activity of light, revealing that there is no darkness except the shadow cast by ignorance. During those days, there would be times when the body expressed discomfort, yet there was no inward tightening, no sense of this is happening to me. There was only the recognition. This, too, is an appearance in consciousness. It is not the truth of my being. And in that non-identification, suffering could not take root. Sensation may arise in the body, but suffering requires a me to suffer, and that me had long since been seen as an illusion. This is the heart of the inner practice, allowing everything to be as it is on the plane of appearance, while resting firmly in the knowing of what is true on the plane of reality. The spiritual student does not attempt to heal appearances. The spiritual student awakens to the truth behind appearances, and the truth is always this: the I that you are does not enter the body at birth, nor does it leave the body at death. The I that you are is the witnessing presence, not the form, witnessed. The I that you are is the life that lives itself, untouched by decay, untouched by endings, untouched by change. To rest in this recognition is to walk in the freedom of the sons of God. And it is this recognition, this silent, effortless recognition, that carried the transition peacefully, naturally, and without fear. For when one abides in I am, there is no death to face, only a gentle releasing of the temporary form through which this infinite presence once expressed. This is not something reserved for a few. It is the natural heritage of every individual who turns within and acknowledges, I live, yet not I, but the Christ. This I am is the life that lives me. Let us go deeper now into this word immortality, for it is a term so often misunderstood. The world hears the word and imagines a personal life extended indefinitely, a human identity preserved eternally, or a body made indestructible by spiritual power. But, my friends, none of this is what immortality means in the life of the Spirit. What is immortal is not the personality. What is immortal is not the human sense of self. What is immortal is not the body or the circumstances of our earthly journey. Immortality belongs only to that which was never born and therefore can never die. And so the first great revelation we must come to is this: there is no such thing as personal immortality. The person, as the world knows it, the name, the form, the accumulated history, has no continuity in spirit. The person appears in time and is dissolved in time, but the life that animates that person, the consciousness that shines through it, the presence that says I, that is eternal, that is the only immortality there is. When I speak of immortality, I speak of that which is alive right now as the awareness hearing these words. I speak of the one who is conscious of existing, yet whose existence does not depend upon the body, nor upon the world, nor upon any external condition. This I, this pure, unconditioned awareness, is the Christ, the Self, the infinite way. It does not begin at conception, nor does it end at death. It stands ever present behind all appearances. The purpose of spiritual living is not to preserve the body forever, but to awaken to the truth that the body is not the seat of your identity. In this awakening, fear dissolves, not because we have conquered death, but because we have seen that nothing real can die. What dies is the picture, what dies is the form, what dies is the mask through which the infinite has temporarily expressed, but the infinite itself remains unchanged. If you examine the great statements of the Master, you will find that he never identified life with the body. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. These statements do not refer to a man. They refer to the eternal presence speaking through the man. The I am is the immortality of every individual. This is why, in those final days, there was no sense of loss, no anticipation of ending, no clinging to the form. There was only the recognition that the I which had lived the entire span of the human experience was the same I that lived before that experience began and would continue after that experience concluded. Immortality, then, is not something to be attained. It is not a reward. It is not a future state. Immortality is the present reality of your being. It is the truth that is already here, already complete, already expressing itself as the consciousness that is aware in this moment. You do not become immortal. You awaken to the immortality that has always been yours. The more clearly this truth is realized, the more gently we move through life, for all fear of loss is rooted in the belief that what we are can be diminished. And once that belief dissolves, a great peace arises, an unshakable peace, a peace not dependent upon circumstance. This is the immortality Joel Goldsmith revealed, not in theory, but in living demonstration. And it is this immortality that you, too, will feel the moment you turn within and recognize, I am the life eternal. appearing now as this individual expression, yet untouched by all the changes on the surface of experience. As we move further into this sacred subject, let us turn our attention away from the outer picture of declining physical form and consider the inner experience, for the outer appearance of a dissolving body tells us nothing about the life that is living itself. Truth reveals itself not in what the senses behold, but in the awareness with which we meet the senses' report. And so, in those final months, the essential activity was not of the body, nor of the mind, but of consciousness resting in its own eternal nature. There were moments when the body spoke loudly, moments of discomfort, moments of fatigue, moments in which the natural processes of physical dissolution made themselves known. Yet even in these moments, there was no inner disturbance, for the one beholding these sensations was not identified with them. That is the great key. Sensations arose in the body, but there was no me in them. They appeared, they passed, and they had no power to create suffering because there was no personal self claiming them. This inner state was not produced through effort. It was not a discipline imposed upon the mind. It was the natural fruit of decades spent in the quiet recognition that I can of mine own self do nothing, and that the life which animates us is God, appearing as individual being. When one has lived from this recognition long enough, identity shifts. The personal sense of self dissolves little by little, and in its place arises the awareness of I am, the universal identity expressing as the individual. It is this shift that made possible the profound peace present in those final days. There was no internal conversation of why is this happening or how can I change this, for those questions belong only to the mind that believes itself separate. Instead, there was a simple and natural abiding. The body is doing what bodies do, but I am not the body. I am the life that witnesses the body. Some have imagined that spiritual mastery means the body should always respond instantly to truth, or that the physical form should be immune to decline. But this is a misunderstanding rooted in the belief that spirit exists to preserve matter. Spirit does not preserve matter. Spirit reveals itself through matter for a season in its own perfect way. And when that season is complete, spirit continues without interruption, without loss, without change. This is what was unfolding within. The inner experience was quiet, not dramatic, not filled with visions or heavenly signs. There were no triumphal declarations, no ecstatic revelations, just a deep, unbroken awareness of presence. A simple knowing, I am, I always have been, I always will be. The form may fade, but I do not. This simplicity is what many seekers overlook. They expect the spiritual path to culminate in great supernatural display, but true realization is not supernatural. It is utterly natural, so natural, in fact, that the world often misses it. It comes with no fireworks, only the gentle disappearance of fear, the quiet dissolution of resistance, the soft abiding in what has always been present. And so, as the body declined, the consciousness behind the form grew clearer, more transparent, more free. There was no clinging, because there was nothing to cling to. There was no fear, because there was no belief in separation from life. There was no sorrow, because what could be lost? The form? Yes. But the self? Never. This is what Goldsmith experienced internally. A deep continuity of being, unbroken by the appearance of bodily change. And you, too, may taste the same continuity, not by imitating an attitude, but by recognizing the truth that the I which lives you now is the same I that lived him, the same I that lives all. The body passes, but I am remains. Now, my friends, let us gently turn from the appearance of one man's transition and consider what this demonstration reveals about your own life, your own consciousness, your own journey on this path. For the significance of those final days lies not in the story of Joel Goldsmith, but in the light they shed upon the truth of your being. Every event in the life of a spiritual teacher holds meaning only to the degree that it awakens recognition within you. And so we ask, what does this reveal about the life you are living now? First, it reveals that the fear of death, the deepest fear known to humanity, is not dissolved by changing circumstances, but by changing identity. You do not overcome fear by adjusting the conditions of your human experience. You overcome fear only by recognizing that the one who seems to fear is not the one you truly are. When identity shifts from the personal self to the I am, fear naturally dissolves, because the I am cannot be threatened. Second, his passing shows us that your security has never depended on the body. Your safety, your continuity, your very existence do not rest upon the strength of your physical form. The body may be healthy or ill, young or old, vigorous or frail, but the life that animates it remains untouched. When you recognize this, truly recognize it, you begin to meet life's challenges with a calmness the world cannot understand. You begin to live from a place of stability that is not conditioned by the senses. Third, you discover that nothing in your experience is as serious as you once believed. When you look at your life from the perspective of eternal being, the troubles that once seemed overwhelming lose their weight. Financial pressures, relationship tensions, bodily discomforts. These remain the appearances they always were, but the sense of me that struggles with them begins to fade. You learn to let things arise and pass without being shaken, because you are centered in the awareness that beholds them. Fourth, you are shown that spiritual realization is practical. It is not something reserved for moments of meditation or spiritual ecstasy. It is not something to be attained in the final days of life. It is to be lived now in the midst of your daily responsibilities, your everyday interactions, your ordinary challenges. Every moment is an opportunity to rest in the truth that the life you are is not the life of the body, not the life of the personality, but the life of God expressing as individual being. Fifth, you learn that the transition called death is not a dramatic event. It is not a rupture in consciousness. It is not a moment of terror or sudden awakening. It is simply the continuation of the same life that is present right now. The consciousness you bring to this moment is the consciousness you bring to that moment. If you live now with fear, you carry fear into that transition. If you live now in recognition, you carry recognition. And so the true work is always here, always now. Finally, his passing teaches you that you are not walking toward a final moment of loss. You are walking toward the deeper unveiling of what you already are. Every day, every challenge, every joy, every sorrow, every appearance of change is part of the slow, gentle dissolving of the belief that you are separate from the source of your being. And as this belief fades, you begin to live differently. You become less reactive, more spacious, more compassionate, not because you try to be, but because the false sense of self is losing its hold. You see, the truth is very simple. The life that lived as Joel Goldsmith is the same life that lives as you. The same I that expressed through his form is expressing through your form. There are not many lives. There is only one life, one presence, one consciousness, appearing as many forms. His passing merely revealed, in a clear and quiet way, the truth that has always been true for all. And when you recognize this, Your own life begins to change not because you adopt new beliefs, but because you awaken to the reality that has been present from the beginning. My friends, having contemplated the nature of immortality and the quiet clarity that accompanied those final days, let us now turn to the practical dimension of this teaching. For truth, to be truth, must be lived. It must permeate our daily experience. It must become the atmosphere through which we meet every appearance, whether joyful or challenging. And so the question arises, how do we approach our own mortality in the same spirit of peace and recognition? How do we prepare not for death, but for the continual unveiling of life? The first and most essential practice is the practice of silence without agenda. Sit quietly each day, even for only a few minutes, without asking, without desiring, without seeking to change any condition. Simply rest in the awareness that I am here. This silence allows the mind to sink beneath the turbulence of thought and touch the deep stillness in which the presence reveals itself, not because we call it forth, but because it is already here. This simple resting begins to loosen the belief that life is something we must manage or protect. Second, begin to see the body with new eyes. The body is not to be despised, nor feared, nor clung to. It is the instrument through which life expresses in this dimension for a season. You care for it naturally, the way one tends to a garden or maintains a home, but you do so without identifying with it. The body may change, but the eye that witnesses the change is unchanging. As you gently, repeatedly see the body as an appearance in consciousness rather than the container of consciousness, you begin to feel an inner freedom that no condition can shake. Third, allow fear thoughts to arise without resisting them. Do not make a battle of the mind. When fear appears, simply acknowledge, this too is a universal belief appearing in my awareness. Do not claim it as yours. Do not struggle with it. Let it pass as clouds pass through the sky. The sky is not disturbed by the clouds, and consciousness is not disturbed by thoughts unless we identify with them. In this way, fear loses its foothold. Fourth, develop the habit of returning again and again to the simple recognition of I am, not as a phrase, not as an affirmation, but as a lived awareness. In moments of stillness, feel into this presence. In moments of difficulty, remember it. In moments of joy, acknowledge it. The more often you return to this recognition, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, it becomes spontaneous, effortless, automatic. And this is the beginning of living from the Christ within. Fifth, release the notion that you must purify the mind, perfect the personality, or perform great spiritual feats. The spiritual life is not a project. It is not a path of self-improvement. It is simply the steady relaxing of the false sense of self until the true emerges in clarity. You do not build the Christ identity. You uncover it, and you uncover it by doing less, not more. Sixth, contemplate often the truth that whatever can die was never you. This contemplation need not be morbid or heavy. It is liberating. Let the thought arise in simplicity. If this body were to fall away this very moment, would the witnessing presence disappear with it? And immediately you will feel the answer, no, I remain. You experience this every night when the body sleeps. You experience it in deep silence when the sense of me disappears. You experience it in moments of awareness when there is no thinker, only presence. Finally, recognize that the preparation for death is simply the preparation for life. There is no special practice for the final day. There is only the daily recognition of truth until the fear-based identity dissolves. Whether you are young or old, healthy or facing illness, the work is always the same. Return to the I am. Rest in the presence. Let the personal sense diminish. Let the eternal self reveal itself. In this way, you approach mortality not as a fearful event, but as a gentle transition, no more significant than the passing of one season into another. When that moment comes, it will be met with the same peace, the same unbroken awareness, the same recognition that guided every step of your life. For the one who knows the I am does not prepare for death. He abides in life, and life continues. My friends, let us come now to a gentle close. And as we do, I would invite you to rest not in thought, not in theory, but in the quiet awareness that is present even now, even here. For everything that has been shared, every truth that has unfolded, every glimpse into the eternal nature of your being has had but one purpose: to lead you home to the awareness of the presence that lives you. There is no journey to complete. There is no finish line to reach. There is no distant spiritual attainment awaiting you in some far-off future. What you seek, you already are. The life you have feared losing has never been yours to lose, for it is not personal life. It is the infinite expressing itself as individual consciousness, one life, one being, one I. When we look upon the transition called death, we do not look upon an ending. We look upon a passing of form, a shedding of the temporary garment. But you, the witnessing presence, are not touched by it. You are the same before, during, and after. The form may fall away, yes, but the life that animates the form does not fall away. It simply withdraws from one appearance and continues, unbroken, as it always has. And so the truth is this: you are not moving toward death. You are moving moment by moment into deeper recognition of life. You are not approaching a point of darkness. You are moving toward the dawning of your own eternal nature. Every fear, every challenge, every moment of stillness, every step on the path, these are not random events. They are invitations, each one calling you to rest more deeply in the I that is God. Let your heart be at peace. You are not fragile. You are not temporary. You are not a creature struggling to survive in a dangerous world. You are the very presence of God, made visible as individual being. You are the light of the Christ, the awareness of I am, appearing here, appearing now, expressing itself in the unique form that the world calls you. The body is a beautiful instrument. Use it, care for it, cherish it while it serves its purpose, but do not mistake it for your life. Let it come, let it go, let it change, let it rest. Through all of this, you remain the silent, watching, eternal self. If you do nothing else as a result of these words, let it be this: turn within each day, even for a moment, and recognize the presence that lives you. Let that recognition become your refuge, your strength, your peace. For in that recognition lies the end of fear, the end of struggle, the end of the belief in separation. In that recognition lies your freedom. And when the time comes for this form to be released, it will not be a moment of terror. It will be a moment of surrender into the very life that has carried you from the beginning. You will recognize it not as the end, but as the continuation of what has always been. The presence that lives you now will live you then. The I that is aware now will be aware then. The life that you are will simply flow into a new expression. Rest, then, in the assurance that nothing real can be lost. Nothing eternal can be threatened, and you are eternal. I am is your name. I am is your identity. I am is your immortality. And in that I am, we are one.
Most people live their entire lives trapped in what Joel Goldsmith called the material sense, a powerful illusion that makes you believe you are separate from the infinite source of all good. This illusion creates every problem you face: lack, disease, conflict, and fear that seem so real. But here is the liberating truth Goldsmith discovered through decades of spiritual healing work. You are not a material being having occasional spiritual experiences. You are pure consciousness itself, temporarily appearing in human form, with unlimited access to divine supply and healing power. The moment you truly grasp this fundamental shift in identity, everything changes. Your problems don't get solved, they dissolve because you realize they were never real in the first place. You stop trying to heal your body and instead recognize your spiritual perfection that was always there. This is not positive thinking or mental tricks. This is the recognition of what you have always been, the very presence of God expressing as your individual being. When you live from this truth, miracles become your natural experience because you are no longer fighting illusions. Joel Goldsmith taught that every human problem stems from one fundamental error: believing that you exist separate from your source. This belief creates what he called the pairs of opposites, good and evil, health and sickness, abundance and lack, that keep you trapped in endless cycles. When you accept that there is only one power and one presence in the universe, these opposites dissolve. There is no evil power to fight, no sickness to heal, no lack to overcome. There is only infinite good expressing itself perfectly as your life, right here and right now. The practical application begins with what Goldsmith called the practice of the presence. Instead of trying to get something from God, you recognize that you already are the fullness of God in expression. Every breath you take is God breathing. Every thought is divine intelligence flowing. Start right now by stopping all mental effort to change your circumstances. Rest in the knowing that perfection is already established. Feel the presence that you are, not the presence you hope to find. This shift from seeking to being is where true transformation begins. Goldsmith discovered that most spiritual seekers make a critical mistake. They try to use truth to improve their human experience, when truth reveals there never was a human experience to improve. You are not a person who can become more spiritual. You are spirit appearing as a person. This understanding transforms prayer completely. Instead of asking God to change your conditions, you recognize that God is your very consciousness, and your consciousness is already perfect, whole, and complete. Prayer becomes a recognition of what already is, not a request for what might be. The healing work that made Goldsmith famous worldwide was based on this principle. He never tried to heal anyone. Instead, he recognized the spiritual perfection of every person who came to him, and this recognition dissolved the illusion of imperfection that seemed to appear as their problem. You have this same power of recognition available to you right now. Look at any challenge in your life and ask, what would be true if I were pure consciousness having this experience? The answer will reveal the illusion and allow the truth to appear naturally. The deepest teaching Goldsmith shared was this: you cannot demonstrate truth. You can only be truth. Every attempt to use spiritual principles to get something keeps you trapped in the very illusion you are trying to escape. Truth is not a tool you use. Truth is what you are. This means that abundance is not something you attract or manifest. Abundance is the very nature of the infinite consciousness that you are. Health is not something you heal into. Health is the unchanging reality of your spiritual being that cannot be touched by material conditions. When you stop trying to demonstrate and simply rest in being, what the world calls miracles begin to appear naturally. Not because you made them happen, but because you stopped interfering with the perfection that was always flowing as your life experience. The invitation Goldsmith offers is radical. Stop being a human trying to be spiritual, and start being the spiritual being you have always been, appearing temporarily as human. This is not a process. This is a recognition that changes everything in an instant. A businessman came to Goldsmith facing bankruptcy. desperately seeking a spiritual solution to save his failing company. For weeks he practiced affirmations and visualizations, trying to demonstrate prosperity, but his situation only worsened. His frustration was overwhelming. Goldsmith told him something unexpected. Stop trying to make your business successful. Stop trying to be prosperous. Instead, recognize that infinite intelligence is the only power operating your consciousness, and infinite intelligence cannot fail. The man was confused but willing to try this different approach. Within 3 days of releasing all personal effort and resting in the presence of divine intelligence as his true identity, breakthrough solutions began appearing, not through his planning, but through inspiration and opportunities that seemed to arise from nowhere. Within 6 months, his business had not only recovered, but had expanded beyond his original dreams. He realized that trying to demonstrate prosperity had actually blocked the natural flow of abundance that was always available through his divine nature. A mother brought her chronically ill child to Goldsmith after years of medical treatments had failed to help. She was exhausted from trying every healing modality, both conventional and alternative, watching her daughter suffer despite all their efforts to make her well. Goldsmith spent no time discussing the child's symptoms or medical history. Instead, he helped the mother see that her daughter was not a sick child who needed healing. She was the perfect expression of divine life, temporarily appearing to experience illness as part of her spiritual journey. As the mother released her identity as someone with a sick child and embraced the truth of her daughter's spiritual perfection, something shifted in their entire family dynamic. The desperate energy of trying to fix something wrong was replaced by peaceful recognition of what was right. Over the following weeks, the child's health began improving naturally, not through any specific treatment, but through the dissolution of the mental atmosphere of illness that had surrounded their home. The healing came through recognition, not through effort. A couple on the verge of divorce sought Goldsmith's guidance, convinced their marriage was beyond repair. Years of conflict, betrayal, and resentment had created what seemed like an insurmountable barrier between them. Traditional counseling had only made them more aware of their differences. Goldsmith surprised them by saying, "There are not two people in conflict here. There is only one consciousness appearing as two individuals, and that consciousness is love itself. The conflict you experience is the illusion of separation from your true nature and from each other." He taught them to see beyond their personality differences and recognize the divine presence that was the true identity of both of them. When they stopped trying to change each other and started recognizing the spiritual perfection already present, their relationship began transforming naturally. Within months, they discovered a depth of love and understanding they had never experienced before. Their marriage became not just restored, but transformed into a spiritual partnership that supported both of their individual growth and their shared service to others. A war veteran struggling with severe trauma and nightmares came to Goldsmith feeling hopeless about ever finding peace. Years of therapy and medication had provided little relief, and he was beginning to believe he was permanently damaged by his experiences overseas. Goldsmith helped him understand that his true identity as spiritual consciousness could never be damaged by any experience, no matter how traumatic. The memories and emotional reactions were real on the human level, but they had no power over his spiritual nature, which remained perfect and untouchable. Through daily practice of recognizing himself as consciousness rather than as a traumatized veteran, he began experiencing moments of profound peace that gradually extended into hours and then days. The nightmares didn't stop through fighting them. They dissolved through recognition of his undisturbed spiritual reality. After a year of this practice, he had not only found personal peace, but had begun helping other veterans discover the same spiritual foundation for healing. His transformation became a source of hope and healing for many others who had lost faith in recovery. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the fundamental recognition of your spiritual identity, Goldsmith taught specific practices to deepen your experience of truth. The first is what he called beholding, learning to look at every person, situation, and condition through spiritual eyes rather than material judgment. When you behold someone, you see past their human appearance to recognize the divine presence that they are. This is not pretending that problems don't exist. It's seeing through the problem to the spiritual reality that remains unchanged regardless of appearances. Practice this now with someone in your life who challenges you. Instead of seeing their personality, behavior, or problems, quietly recognize the Christ consciousness is the only presence here. Perfection is the only reality expressing as this person. Notice how this shifts your entire experience of them. This practice of beholding dissolves the sense of otherness that creates all relationship conflicts. When you consistently see people as they truly are spiritually, they begin responding from their highest nature because you are no longer holding them in the prison of limited human expectations. The second complementary practice Goldsmith taught is listening within, developing the ability to receive divine guidance directly rather than relying solely on human reasoning and planning. This inner listening is not meditation in the traditional sense, but receptive awareness to spiritual inspiration. Begin each day by taking time to be still and receptive, asking, "What would love have me know today?" Don't try to hear specific answers. Instead, develop sensitivity to the gentle impulses, ideas, and feelings that arise from your deeper spiritual nature. As you practice this listening, you'll discover that divine intelligence is always seeking to express through you as perfect action, right decisions, and loving responses. You don't have to figure out your life. You only need to be receptive to the guidance that is always flowing. This practice transforms decision-making from struggle into grace. Instead of weighing pros and cons with your human mind, you learn to feel your way into alignment with the divine will that already knows the perfect outcome for every situation. The third practice is releasing into the invisible, learning to let go of your human attempts to control outcomes and trust the spiritual forces that are always working on your behalf. This requires developing faith in what cannot be seen, but can always be felt. When facing any challenge, instead of immediately trying to solve it with human effort, first take time to release the situation completely into the care of divine intelligence. Say, "I don't know how this will resolve, but I trust the spiritual law to bring perfect harmony." This release is not passive resignation, it's active cooperation with spiritual power. As you let go of your limited human solutions, you create space for divine solutions that are beyond anything your personal mind could have conceived or accomplished. Many students struggle with this practice because it seems like giving up, but releasing into the invisible is actually the highest form of spiritual action. You are aligning your individual will with the universal will that already knows the perfect outcome. The final complementary practice is living from grace, recognizing that your good comes not from your efforts, but from the inexhaustible source within you that gives freely without your having to earn or deserve it. This transforms your relationship with both giving and receiving. Grace means that your supply is not dependent on your job, your efforts, or economic conditions. Your supply flows from the infinite storehouse of consciousness itself, which can never be depleted and has no external limitations or restrictions. Practice giving without expectation of return, knowing that your generosity opens channels for grace to flow more freely through your experience. When you give from the understanding that you are the outlet of infinite supply, giving becomes joy rather than sacrifice. Simultaneously, learn to receive gracefully without guilt, or the need to reciprocate immediately. When you understand that all good flows from the one source, receiving someone's kindness is simply accepting another form of divine grace, expressing through human channels. The most common obstacle students encounter is the tendency to evaluate their spiritual progress by their human circumstances. When conditions don't improve quickly, they assume the principles aren't working and return to human efforts to control their experience. Goldsmith taught that spiritual progress is often invisible to the human sense. Your consciousness may be transforming profoundly, while your external circumstances temporarily remain unchanged. The real work is happening in your recognition and awareness, not necessarily in your material conditions. Instead of measuring success by what appears in your world, measure it by your inner sense of peace, your freedom from fear, and your growing ability to see through appearances to spiritual reality. These inner changes are the true indicators of spiritual growth. Trust the process, even when you cannot see immediate results. Often the greatest transformations happen quietly over time as your new spiritual understanding gradually dissolves old patterns and creates space for entirely new experiences to emerge naturally. Another significant challenge is the temptation to use these spiritual principles to fix specific problems, rather than allowing them to transform your entire foundation of understanding. This approach keeps you trapped in the illusion that there are problems to solve. When you focus on demonstrating health, prosperity, or harmony, you're actually affirming the reality of disease, lack, and discord. True spiritual healing recognizes that these opposite conditions never had any real existence. They were only appearances in consciousness. The correct approach is to recognize perfection as the only reality and allow that recognition to naturally dissolve whatever seems to contradict it. You're not healing anything. You're recognizing what was never truly ill or broken. This shift requires patience and persistence because the human mind wants to see immediate changes in conditions. But as you consistently rest in truth rather than trying to demonstrate it, the appearances naturally align with your spiritual understanding. Many students also struggle with guilt about their human experiences, believing they should be beyond certain emotions, desires, or reactions if they truly understand spiritual truth. This judgment actually creates more separation from their spiritual nature. Goldsmith taught that being human while recognizing your spiritual identity is not a contradiction. It's the very purpose of your existence. You are consciousness experiencing itself through human form, and this includes the full range of human feelings and experiences. The goal is not to eliminate your humanity, but to hold it lightly, recognizing that your human experiences are temporary expressions of consciousness rather than your permanent identity. You can feel anger, sadness, or fear without believing these emotions define who you are. Compassion toward your human experience creates the inner space for your spiritual nature to express more freely. When you stop judging your humanness, you naturally begin expressing more of your divine qualities without effort or strain. The deepest challenge students face is the fear that if they truly let go of human effort and control, nothing good will happen in their lives. This fear keeps them oscillating between spiritual practice and human manipulation, preventing full transformation. This fear is actually the ego's last defense against the recognition of your true nature. The ego believes it is responsible for your survival and success, so releasing control feels like death to the separate sense of self that has run your life. The truth is that when you release human effort, you don't become passive. You become receptive to divine action that is far more intelligent and powerful than anything your personal mind could orchestrate. You trade limited human solutions for unlimited spiritual possibilities. Take the step of complete release in one area of your life as an experiment. Choose something you've been struggling to control and surrender it entirely to spiritual law. Watch how divine intelligence begins operating when you stop interfering with its perfect action. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to live in what Goldsmith called the atmosphere of God, a state of consciousness where spiritual awareness becomes so natural that it requires no effort to maintain. This is consciousness living as consciousness, rather than a person trying to be spiritual. In this atmosphere, you respond to every situation from spiritual understanding, rather than human reaction. When someone is hostile, you see their underlying spiritual perfection. When lack appears, you recognize abundance as the only reality. When disease manifests, you know health as the unchanging truth. This doesn't mean you become detached or uncaring about human experiences. Instead, you become more loving and effective because you're operating from the source of all wisdom and compassion rather than from personal opinions and emotional reactions. Living in this atmosphere transforms not only your personal experience, but influences everyone around you. People feel peaceful in your presence because you are no longer projecting the conflicts and fears that most humans carry unconsciously. The integration of these principles into daily work and relationships requires what Goldsmith called practicing the presence throughout ordinary activities. This means recognizing that consciousness is the only activity taking place, whether you're cooking dinner, attending meetings, or raising children. When you approach work from this understanding, your job becomes a spiritual practice rather than just a means of earning money. Every task becomes an opportunity for consciousness to express its intelligence, creativity, and love, through the form of your individual life. Relationships transform when you consistently see the people in your life as consciousness appearing in different forms, rather than as separate individuals with conflicting needs and desires. Conflicts resolve naturally when you refuse to accept the illusion of separation. Even mundane activities like cleaning house or paying bills become expressions of divine order when you recognize that consciousness is the only presence performing these activities. Nothing is separate from your spiritual nature. Everything becomes sacred. Advanced students often face the challenge of living these principles while dealing with family members or colleagues who operate purely from material sense. You cannot force others to see spiritually, but you can maintain your own spiritual perspective regardless of their level of understanding. The key is to never defend or argue about spiritual principles. Live from them quietly, and let your peace and effectiveness speak for itself. When others see the fruits of consciousness in your life, some will naturally become curious about your inner foundation. For those who remain resistant or critical of your spiritual approach, recognize that their opposition is not personal. It's the material sense defending itself against the recognition of truth. Respond with compassion rather than attempting to convince them intellectually. Your consistent demonstration of spiritual principles in practical daily life becomes a silent blessing to everyone around you. You are establishing an atmosphere of truth that influences others, even when they are not consciously aware of it. The ultimate integration happens when the line between spiritual practice and ordinary living disappears completely. You no longer have times when you remember to be spiritual and times when you forget. Consciousness becomes your permanent resting place. At this level, challenges still appear in human experience, but they no longer disturb your inner equilibrium. You handle difficulties from spiritual understanding rather than human frustration, which often resolves situations more quickly and harmoniously than reactive responses. You stop seeking spiritual experiences and start recognizing that every moment is already spiritual. Whether you're experiencing joy or difficulty, success or apparent failure, you maintain awareness that consciousness is the only reality expressing as all these temporary appearances. This integration is not a destination you reach, but a deepening recognition that continues expanding throughout your lifetime. Each day offers new opportunities to live more consistently from your spiritual understanding rather than from human appearance. The complete transformation Goldsmith pointed toward is the recognition that you have never been separate from your source for even one moment. All the years of seeking, struggling, and trying to become more spiritual were based on the false premise that you were not already whole. This recognition doesn't make you perfect in human terms. It reveals the perfection that has always been your true nature, temporarily expressing through human experience. Your problems were never really problems. They were opportunities for consciousness to know itself more completely. When this understanding becomes living reality rather than intellectual concept, fear dissolves permanently. Not because your circumstances become perfect, but because you recognize that your true self can never be threatened by any external condition or change. You discover that everything you thought you needed to accomplish or achieve was actually already accomplished in consciousness. Your only work is to recognize what is already perfect and allow that perfection to express itself naturally through your human experience. From this transformed perspective, you realize that your entire spiritual journey has been consciousness awakening to itself through the vehicle of your individual awareness. Every challenge, every breakthrough, every moment of confusion or clarity has been part of this awakening process. You understand now that you were never a separate person trying to find God. You have always been God expressing as an individual person, temporarily forgetting and then remembering your true nature. The seeker and the sought were never two different things. This recognition brings profound gratitude for every experience you've had, including the difficult ones, because you see how each experience contributed to the awakening of consciousness within your awareness. Nothing was wasted. Everything served the ultimate purpose. You no longer feel the need to prove or defend your spiritual understanding because you know it as living reality rather than belief system. Your life becomes a natural expression of consciousness, knowing itself as your individual being. The practical result of this transformation is that you become a beneficial presence wherever you go, not through trying to help or heal others, but simply through being consciousness awake to itself, which automatically blesses everyone who comes into contact with your atmosphere. You stop having a personal agenda about how your life should unfold and instead become receptive to how consciousness wants to express through your unique individuality. This creates a life of constant surprise and delight as new possibilities appear naturally. Problems don't disappear from human experience, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Instead of obstacles to overcome, they become opportunities for consciousness to reveal new aspects of its infinite nature through your individual awareness. You discover that true service to others happens not through doing specific things, but through maintaining your recognition of spiritual truth, which creates an atmosphere where others can more easily recognize their own spiritual nature. The ultimate secret Joel Goldsmith revealed is this: you are not a human being on a spiritual journey. You are consciousness itself, temporarily appearing as a human being for the joy of experiencing its own infinite nature through individual awareness and expression. This means that every moment of your existence, whether pleasant or challenging, is consciousness celebrating its own aliveness through the unique perspective of your individual being. You are literally God's way of experiencing what it's like to be you. When this becomes your living understanding rather than just a beautiful idea, your entire relationship to existence transforms. Fear becomes impossible because you recognize there is nothing separate from you that could threaten you. Love becomes natural because you see yourself in everyone and everything. You realize that awakening was never about becoming something different. It was about recognizing what you have always been. The journey ends where it began, but now you know yourself as consciousness rather than as a seeker. You are home, and you have never left. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.